Rancher repaired a stuck wagon of a sensual Apache woman. Then, she was forced to marry. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the wide plains, casting a golden light that shimmered across the tall, dry grass. The air smelled faintly of earth and wildflowers, and the quiet of early morning was broken only by the distant calls of birds and the occasional lowing of cattle. John, a rancher in his mid-30s, was already busy with his morning routine. His hands were rough from years of labor, but they moved skillfully as he inspected the fences, checked the water troughs, and made sure his cattle were all accounted for. Life on the plains was hard, but John had learned to find a quiet satisfaction in the routine. Every day demanded effort, but every day also offered moments of beauty that few people in the cities could ever understand. As John worked, he noticed something unusual in the distance. A wagon had come to a stop near the shallow creek that cut through his land. But it wasn't just stopped, it was stuck. The wheels were mired deep in mud, and the wagon's single horse was straining against the harness, its legs trembling. The sight drew John's attention immediately. On these plains, travelers often got into trouble. A stuck wagon could mean someone in danger, especially if they were traveling alone. He wiped his hands on his worn trousers and mounted his horse, urging it toward the struggling figure. As he approached, he saw her more clearly. She was a woman, young, with sharp, alert eyes that seemed to study everything around her carefully. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her clothing was simple but well-made, clearly designed for travel. Her skin was tanned by the sun, and her hands were delicate yet strong from handling her wagon and the horse. John could sense the tension in her body as she tugged at the reins and muttered softly under her breath. There was a determination in her movements, but also a hint of frustration. "Need some help?" John called, keeping his voice calm but firm. The woman glanced up sharply. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of caution and surprise. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a voice that was steady but tinged with annoyance, she said, "I can manage." John knew the type. People often refused help at first, either out of pride or fear. He dismounted, tethered his horse, and walked closer to the wagon. "The mud's deep and that horse is tiring," he said. "You'll hurt yourself trying to free it alone." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, and then, with a reluctant nod, she said, "All right, if you know what you're doing." That was all John needed. He moved quickly, assessing the wagon, the wheels, and the stuck horse. He instructed her to take the reins gently and to steady the horse while he lifted the back wheel. Sweat already dampened his forehead, but he worked with careful precision. Slowly, with John's guidance and her help, the wagon shifted, the wheels finally breaking free of the sticky mud. The horse shook its mane, stamping its hooves, and John stepped back to catch his breath. "You did well," he said, smiling lightly. "That could have taken hours if we didn't work together." The woman gave a faint smile, one that was polite but cautious. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice had a musical quality, though it was underscored by wariness. She looked at John with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude, though she didn't fully relax. John nodded, glancing around the plains. "It's easy to get stuck out here. The ground looks solid, but one wrong step and you're in trouble." She shook her head. "I've traveled far, but this place, it's different from where I've been." There was a pause, as if she were deciding how much to reveal. "I didn't expect anyone to be nearby." John sensed the layers in her words, the independence, the pride, the survival instinct. He had met travelers before, but rarely someone who carried herself with such quiet strength. He knew that this encounter was unusual, and he felt a strange mixture of respect and curiosity. "I'm John," he said, extending his hand in a simple gesture. "I live just over the ridge." Always good to lend a hand when someone's in trouble. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, her grip firm but careful. "Yana," she said. Her name sounded like the wind moving through the plains, soft, flowing, and strong. For a few minutes they stood in silence, letting the tension ease. The wagon was free, the horse calm again, and the sun climbed higher, warming their backs. John noticed the lines of fatigue on Iana's face, but he also noticed the determination in her eyes. She was clearly someone who had faced hardship before and would continue to face it, no matter how difficult the road became. "Where are you headed?" John asked casually, though he knew the answer might be private. Iana's gaze flicked toward the horizon where the plains stretched endlessly. "South," she replied. "There's a settlement there. I need supplies and then more travel." Her words were simple, but John sensed a story behind them, a life filled with challenges that she carried quietly. He nodded. "It's not far, but it can be tricky to navigate without guidance. The creek is deeper in some places, and the winds, they can change fast." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I can handle myself," she said, but there was no pride in her tone, only a quiet certainty. John studied her for a moment, thinking about the isolation of life on these plains. There was something admirable about her spirit, something that reminded him of the few strong people he had known who refused to give in to fear. He made a decision. He wouldn't force himself into her journey, but he would offer a path if she needed it. "Look," he said finally, "if you ever find yourself in trouble again, my place is just over the ridge. You'll always have a safe spot to rest." Iana's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the offer, though she didn't show it openly. "I appreciate that," she said simply, returning to her wagon. With careful movements, she readied her horse and wagon for travel once more. John watched, feeling a quiet respect for her courage. He knew that the plains could be unforgiving, that travelers often faced danger alone, and that offering help was sometimes all one could do in a vast, lonely land. As she began moving again, their paths diverged. John rode back toward his ranch, and Iana headed south, each carrying the memory of the brief encounter. But there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of strength, of perseverance, and of the shared experience of survival on the wide, challenging plains. For John, the day went on as usual, but the image of Iana, standing strong beside her wagon, lingered in his mind. There was something remarkable about her resilience, and he knew that their brief meeting had left an impression on both of them. Life on the plains was unpredictable, and this encounter reminded him that human connections, brief as they might be, could leave lasting marks on the heart. And for Iana, the plains seemed both wider and more challenging than before, yet there was a small comfort in knowing that not all strangers were threats. Some were allies, willing to help even when the world around them was indifferent or harsh. That memory, small but significant, would stay with her as she continued her journey south, one determined step at a time. The plains stretched endlessly, golden in the sunlight, with waves of tall grass swaying gently in the breeze. Iana guided her wagon slowly southward, her horse plodding steadily along the dusty path. The memory of the rancher, John, lingered in her mind, though she did not allow herself to dwell on it. She had traveled far and endured many hardships already, and there was no time to linger on fleeting encounters. Her mind was focused on her journey, the supplies she needed, and the safe passage through territory that could be unpredictable and dangerous. As she moved along the trail, the wind carried with it the distant sounds of life, birds singing, insects buzzing, and occasionally the low rumble of a herd of cattle in the distance. Iana felt a strange mixture of solitude and freedom. Traveling alone allowed her to move at her own pace, to make her own decisions, and to rely solely on her own strength and skill. But it also brought with it a sharp awareness of vulnerability. Every creek, every hill, and every curve in the trail held the potential for trouble. She kept her eyes alert, scanning the horizon for anything unusual, from predators to other travelers. By midday, she had reached a small clearing where the sunlight fell brightly through the scattered trees. The ground here was firmer, and she decided to take a brief rest. She tethered her horse to a nearby tree, unpacked a small bundle of food, and settled down on the ground. The peace of the moment was almost overwhelming after hours of tension on the trail. She ate slowly, savoring the simple flavors, and let herself relax just enough to enjoy the warmth of the sun. It was then that she heard the faint sound of hooves approaching from behind. Her body tensed instantly. Years of traveling alone had taught her that any unexpected visitor could be dangerous. She grabbed the reins of her horse, ready to move if necessary, and waited. Soon, a rider appeared over the rise, a young man on horseback, carrying a small pack. He was clearly a traveler like herself, though the relaxed way he guided his horse suggested experience rather than urgency. "Good day," the man called politely, raising a hand in greeting. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm just passing through." Yana studied him carefully. There was nothing threatening in his posture or expression, but experience had taught her to be cautious. "Good day," she replied cautiously. "The trail is open, but it can be dangerous if you're not careful." He nodded. "I know well enough. Name S. David. I travel these plains often. Mind if I rest here for a short while?" Yana hesitated. She had learned to trust her instincts. Something about the man seemed genuine, and she needed the brief company, if only to exchange stories of the land. "Very well," she said finally. "A short rest is fine." David dismounted, carefully tending to his horse, and they sat a short distance apart. Conversation began cautiously, first about the terrain, the weather, and the condition of the plains. Yana found herself speaking more freely than she had expected. There was a comfort in sharing her thoughts with someone who understood the challenges of traveling alone, someone who had also faced the unpredictable nature of the land. Hours passed with the soft rhythm of the wind and the occasional call of distant birds. Yana told David about her travels, the places she had seen, and the people she had met. She spoke of her family, though not in detail, and the customs that shaped her life. David listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights about life on the plains that only someone with experience could provide. As the afternoon sun began to dip, shadows lengthening across the clearing, Yana felt a sense of ease she had rarely experienced on her travels. The plains could be lonely and harsh, but here, in this small moment of shared understanding, she felt a quiet connection. It was a reminder that even in isolation, human kindness and understanding could be found. Suddenly, the distant sound of a wagon approaching interrupted their conversation. Yana's instincts went on high alert once again. She rose slowly, scanning the horizon. A covered wagon appeared, moving slowly but steadily along the trail. The sight brought back memories of her own encounter with John, the rancher who had helped her days before. She realized that traveling alone meant that such encounters were rare, and yet they could leave a lasting impact. The approaching travelers were a small family, moving with purpose but careful not to rush. Yana watched them pass at a distance, her mind reflecting on the fragility and strength of life on the plains. Families, travelers, and strangers all had to navigate the land carefully, relying on their wits, their strength, and sometimes the kindness of others. She understood more clearly than ever that survival here required both caution and trust in those who had proven themselves dependable. As evening approached, the air grew cooler, and the sky transformed into shades of orange and pink. Yana knew she needed to find a safe place to camp for the night. The plains offered beauty, but they also demanded respect. She guided her horse to a small grove of trees near a gentle stream, where the ground was dry and firm. Here she would make camp, tend to her horse, and rest before continuing her journey. While setting up her small campsite, she thought about her encounter with John again. There was something admirable about his willingness to help a stranger, his quiet strength, and his respect for her independence. She had seen few people in her life who balanced kindness with understanding in such a way. The memory of his calm voice and careful hands lingered, reminding her that moments of human connection, however brief, could leave a lasting impression. That night, as she lay under the wide expanse of stars, Ayana reflected on the lessons of the day. Traveling alone demanded courage, skill, and vigilance, but it also offered moments of connection that brought hope and comfort. The plains were vast and sometimes unforgiving, but the people she met along the way reminded her that compassion and understanding could be found even in the most remote places. Sleep came slowly, but eventually, exhaustion overtook her vigilance. She dreamed of the golden plains stretching endlessly, of encounters with strangers who had shown kindness, and of the small comforts that made survival possible. In her dreams, the plains seemed less lonely, less harsh, and more filled with opportunities for connection and understanding. Morning arrived with the first light, and Ayana awoke to the gentle sound of the stream and the soft movement of her horse. She packed her belongings carefully, checked her wagon, and prepared to continue her journey. The day ahead promised new challenges, but she felt a renewed sense of determination. The experiences of the previous day had reminded her that even in a world filled with uncertainty, moments of trust, courage, and human kindness could provide strength. As she set off along the trail once more, Ayana carried with her not only her belongings and provisions, but also the quiet lessons of the plains. She knew that the road ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, but she was ready to face whatever came with resilience and careful thought. Her encounters, both with strangers and with those she would meet in the future, were small pieces of a larger journey, one that demanded strength, wisdom, and a willingness to trust, even when the path was uncertain. Hours passed as she moved steadily southward. The sun climbed higher, and the wind began to pick up, carrying with it the scents and sounds of the plains. Ayana felt a growing connection to the land, a sense of belonging that came not from ownership but from understanding and respect. The plains could be harsh, but they also offered freedom, the freedom to move, to make choices, and to navigate life on one's own terms. By the time the sun began its descent, Ayana reached a small settlement at the edge of the plains. Wooden buildings clustered near a gentle river, smoke curling from chimneys, and people moved about, busy with daily tasks. Here, she could rest, gather supplies, and prepare for the next leg of her journey. The settlement was a welcome sight, a reminder that even in a world that often demanded solitude and resilience, there were places of safety, community, and understanding. As she entered the settlement, Ayana felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The journey so far had tested her, challenged her, and taught her valuable lessons about trust, perseverance, and human connection. She knew that the days ahead would bring new experiences, some difficult and some rewarding, but she felt ready to face them with the knowledge that she was capable, resourceful, and resilient. And as she moved through the streets of the settlement, gathering supplies and observing the lives of those around her, Ayana carried with her the quiet memory of the plains, the wind, the grass, the sun, and the brief but meaningful connections that had reminded her that even in the vastest, loneliest places, human kindness could be found. Ayana's days in the settlement began with a sense of cautious purpose. The small town was alive with activity, merchants opening their shops, children running through the streets, and farmers guiding their animals along the dusty roads. To Ayana, the settlement offered both comfort and challenge. It was a place where she could rest, gather supplies, and learn more about the outside world. Yet, the presence of so many people also reminded her that the world beyond the plains could be complex, filled with rules, expectations, and pressures she could not always control. Her first task was to find provisions for the next stage of her journey. She carefully checked each item she needed: food that would last, tools for repair, and warm blankets for the nights that were already growing colder. As she moved through the crowded streets, she was keenly aware of the stares that followed her. Travelers were often met with curiosity, especially those who carried themselves with the quiet strength of someone used to surviving on their own. Yana had long grown accustomed to attention, both curious and cautious, and she met it with quiet dignity. While gathering supplies, she heard whispers that hinted at the challenges she would soon face. Some townspeople spoke of tensions between settlers and the native communities in the region, discussing the increasing pressure on tribal lands and the ways in which outsiders were beginning to influence long-standing traditions. Yana's heart tightened at these conversations. She had grown up learning the customs and ways of her people, and she knew how fragile the balance between tradition and outside influence could be. Her journey was not just physical, it was deeply tied to her identity and her connection to her heritage. That evening, as she prepared her meal near a small fire outside the inn where she had rented a room, Ayana's thoughts returned to her family. Though she had traveled far, she knew that expectations awaited her back home. Her family and tribal leaders held traditions that were both protective and restrictive. For young women, marriage was not always a choice. It was often a duty, a way to secure alliances, safety, and stability for the family. Yana had understood this from a young age, but now, away from her home, the reality of those pressures felt both closer and more urgent. Her rest was interrupted by a knock at the door. A messenger from her tribe had arrived, sent to bring news and to remind her of the obligations she carried. Yana opened the door cautiously, greeting the man with a mixture of politeness and wariness. He spoke quickly, delivering the message that her family expected her return and that arrangements were being made for her marriage. The words weighed heavily on her. She had hoped that travel and distance might grant her some freedom, but the reach of tradition was long and powerful. Yana spent the night in deep thought, considering her options. She was strong, resourceful, and capable of surviving on her own, but she could not ignore the ties to her family and her community. Her people's customs were designed to ensure safety and continuity, and defying them could lead to consequences both personal and social. She felt the tension between her desire for independence and the responsibilities that had been placed upon her from birth. The night was long, filled with silent contemplation, as the fire burned low and the stars shone through the small window of her room. The next morning, Ayana sought counsel from those she trusted. She spoke to an elder in the settlement, a woman who had traveled widely and understood both the ways of the plains and the expectations of tradition. The elder listened patiently, nodding as Ayana recounted the message from her family and the pressures she now faced. "The path you walk is never simple," the elder said softly. "You must weigh your own heart against the customs that guide your people. Strength is not only in survival, but in understanding when to stand firm and when to bend with the wind." Yana left the elder with a mixture of gratitude and concern. She knew the advice was wise, but the reality was still daunting. Her journey, which had begun with the simple task of traveling safely across the plains, had now become entwined with decisions that would shape her future. The roads ahead were uncertain, and she felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing upon her. Yet she also understood that courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Over the following days, Ayana prepared for her return to her family. She packed carefully, making sure that her belongings were secure and that her horse and wagon were ready for the long journey. As she moved through the town for the last time, she noticed the eyes of the townspeople watching her. Some were curious, others respectful, and a few seemed to sense the determination that lay beneath her calm exterior. Each glance reminded her that life was a web of connections, some chosen and some imposed, and that navigating it required both intelligence and patience. Along the way, she reflected on her encounter with John, the rancher who had helped her weeks before. That brief connection, formed in the middle of the plains, had reminded her of the goodness and reliability that could exist even among strangers. She thought about the ways in which kindness and understanding could cross cultural boundaries, creating moments of trust in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The memory of his calm presence gave her strength, even as she faced the pressures awaiting her at home. The journey back was filled with both anticipation and apprehension. Each mile brought her closer to her family and the life she had temporarily left behind. She traveled steadily, tending to her horse and wagon, observing the land and maintaining vigilance. The plains were unforgiving, but she had grown skilled at reading the terrain, predicting weather patterns and navigating safely. Yet the human element, the expectations, the pressures, and the impending changes to her life, was what weighed most heavily on her mind. When she finally reached the edge of her tribe's lands, Ayanna was greeted by familiar faces. The warmth of recognition mixed with the seriousness of responsibility created a complex atmosphere. Her family welcomed her, yet there was a clear reminder of the obligations she carried. Discussions about her future were immediate and practical, focusing on the arrangements for her marriage, the alliances it would secure, and the role she would play in the continuity of her community. Ayanna listened carefully, acknowledging the importance of these decisions, even as her heart yearned for some measure of autonomy. Over the following days, she prepared for the ceremonies and obligations that lay ahead. Friends and family visited, bringing gifts, sharing stories, and offering guidance. The days were busy and structured, leaving little room for hesitation. Yet amidst the activity, Ayanna found moments to reflect quietly. She walked along the edges of the plains, observing the patterns of the land, listening to the wind, and allowing herself brief periods of solitude. These moments reminded her of the journey she had taken, the skills she had honed, and the strength she carried within her. Even as the arrangements for her marriage progressed, Ayanna remained resolute in her ability to navigate life with intelligence and grace. She understood that the pressures she faced were part of a larger system designed to maintain balance and safety within her community. Yet she also recognized that her experiences outside the tribe, her travels, her encounters with strangers, and the independence she had cultivated, had shaped her in ways that could not be ignored. She carried both worlds within her, balancing tradition and personal growth, and learning to navigate the delicate space between them. As the final days before her marriage approached, Ayanna felt a mixture of emotions. There was anxiety about the unknown, respect for her family's guidance, and a quiet pride in her own resilience. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, both visible and hidden, and that her strength would be tested in new ways. But she also knew that she had faced the plains, traveled alone, and survived with courage and intelligence. Those experiences would remain with her, guiding her as she stepped into the next chapter of her life. Through it all, Ayanna's thoughts occasionally returned to John and the brief, meaningful connection they had shared. Though they were separated by distance and circumstance, the memory of his kindness lingered, a quiet reminder that the world contained people capable of understanding and empathy. It was a reminder that even within the structures of duty and expectation, moments of trust and connection could provide strength, hope, and inspiration. Finally, the day of the arranged meeting arrived. Ayanna presented herself with calm dignity, acknowledging the presence of her family, her elders, and the community leaders who had guided her since childhood. She spoke with respect, listened carefully, and carried herself with the quiet strength that had defined her journey. Though the path ahead would require adaptation, compromise, and resilience, she was prepared to face it with the knowledge that she had survived the plains, navigated challenges with intelligence, and maintained her inner strength. And as she stepped forward into this new chapter of her life, Ayanna carried with her the lessons of the journey. The understanding that independence could coexist with duty, that courage was often silent, and that human connections, whether brief or lasting, could illuminate even the most difficult paths. The pressures of tradition and expectation were real, but so too was her ability to meet them with wisdom, patience, and unwavering resilience. The days leading up to Ayana's arranged marriage were filled with a mix of preparation, reflection, and quiet tension. Her family moved about with careful efficiency, ensuring that all the customs and rituals were observed. There were gifts to be exchanged, blessings to be sought, and guidance to be offered. Jana observed everything with attentive eyes, understanding the importance of each detail. Yet inwardly she wrestled with the reality that her personal choices were limited. The weight of responsibility pressed upon her, but she carried it with the dignity that had been part of her nature since childhood. Her mornings began early, often with the rising sun painting the plains in hues of gold and orange. She assisted her mother with preparations, helping to arrange the ceremonial items, sewing intricate patterns into garments, and ensuring that everything was ready. Each action was performed carefully, a silent acknowledgement of the traditions that guided her people. Though her heart longed for freedom and the simplicity of her earlier travels, she understood the value of honoring her family and her culture. Duty, she knew, was as much a part of her identity as her independence. Evenings brought quiet moments, often spent alone beneath the wide sky. Gianna would walk along the edges of the village, feeling the soft earth beneath her feet, listening to the rustling of leaves in the breeze, and reflecting on her life. She thought about the plains she had traveled, the challenges she had faced, and the people she had met along the way. John, the rancher who had helped her when her wagon was stuck, came to mind often. Though he was far away and their paths might never cross again, the memory of his kindness and understanding offered her a small measure of comfort. It reminded her that human connections, even brief ones, could carry strength and hope. The elders of the tribe were clear about the expectations. Her family, her community, and the tribal leaders had agreed upon her marriage as a way to strengthen alliances, ensure her protection, and uphold tradition. Jana listened carefully, absorbing their words, recognizing the wisdom and experience behind them. She did not feel anger toward them. Rather, she felt the quiet weight of responsibility. Her own desires and dreams had to be balanced with the needs of her people. It was a delicate equilibrium, and one that required patience, courage, and grace. As the day of the ceremony approached, preparations intensified. Friends and relatives arrived, bringing with them gifts, blessings, and expressions of encouragement. The village was alive with activity, vibrant and full of energy. Music and laughter echoed through the streets as women worked together to prepare food, decorate spaces, and share stories. Iana participated fully, her hands busy, her mind reflective. She found small moments of joy in the bustling activity, the warmth of family, the beauty of ritual, and the quiet pride in carrying forward the customs of her people. Yet beneath the surface of these celebrations, a tension lingered. Jana was acutely aware that the life she had known as a traveler, the independence she had cultivated through months on the plains, was about to change. Her marriage was not a result of romance or personal choice. It was a decision made by tradition and necessity. She faced the unknown with a mixture of anxiety and resolve, knowing that she would need to adapt to new circumstances while maintaining her sense of self. On the morning of the ceremony, Ayana awoke before dawn. The first light of day crept across the horizon, illuminating the village and casting long shadows across the plains. She dressed carefully, her garments vibrant and adorned with symbolic patterns that spoke of her heritage. Each item was chosen with intention, reflecting both the beauty of tradition and the solemnity of the occasion. Her mother assisted her with the final touches, fastening delicate braids and ensuring that every detail was in place. The ceremony itself was held in a large, open space near the center of the village. Elders, family members, and community leaders gathered, their expressions a mix of solemnity and pride. Yana stepped forward with calm dignity, acknowledging each person with a nod or a respectful greeting. She could feel the eyes of her future spouse, as well as the collective attention of the community. Every movement, every gesture, carried significance. She was aware that her actions would reflect not only on herself, but also on her family and her tribe. The rituals began with prayers and blessings, words spoken in a melodic cadence that resonated deeply within Yana. She listened intently, feeling the connection to her ancestors, her people, and the traditions that had guided generations before her. There was a sense of continuity, a link between the past and the present, and though she felt the weight of her obligations, she also felt a quiet pride in being part of something larger than herself. As the ceremony continued, Yana found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the plains she had traversed, the challenges she had faced alone, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She remembered the times when she had been tested by nature, by circumstance, and by the unpredictability of life. Each trial had strengthened her, teaching her resilience, patience, and resourcefulness. These qualities, she realized, would serve her well in this new chapter of life. Her future spouse approached with measured steps, their expression serious but respectful. The exchange of vows and blessings was conducted with care, honoring both the traditions of the tribe and the dignity of the individuals involved. Yana spoke with clarity and respect, listening to the words offered to her, and responding with the grace she had cultivated through years of thoughtful living. Though her heart held a mixture of apprehension and hope, she embraced the ceremony with the understanding that this moment marked a new beginning, not an end to her strength or identity. After the formalities concluded, the celebrations began. Music, dance, and shared meals filled the air with joy and community spirit. Yana participated fully, finding comfort in the warmth and support of those around her. She understood that while her independence would now be shared with another, it did not diminish the qualities that had carried her through her journey. Her courage, intelligence, and resilience remained intact, guiding her as she navigated the complexities of married life. As evening fell, Ayana and her new spouse walked together through the quiet village, reflecting on the day and the responsibilities that lay ahead. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and the air carried the soft sounds of the plains, the distant calls of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle flow of a nearby stream. It was a moment of calm amidst the whirlwind of activity, a time for contemplation and connection. Yana understood that the challenges of the future would be many. There would be expectations, adjustments, and compromises to navigate. Yet she also recognized that she possessed the strength to meet these challenges with intelligence and courage. Her experiences traveling alone had taught her self-reliance, patience, and the value of human kindness. These lessons would remain with her, guiding her as she adapted to a new role, new responsibilities, and new relationships. In the days that followed, Ayana settled into her new life. She approached each task with care, balancing the demands of tradition with her own need for autonomy. She found ways to contribute meaningfully to her household, while also carving out moments for reflection, learning, and personal growth. Though the path was not always easy, she faced it with the quiet determination that had defined her life from the beginning. Even as she adapted to her new circumstances, Ayana never forgot the lessons of her journey. She remembered the plains, the encounters with strangers, and the moments of courage and kindness that had shaped her. These memories served as a source of strength, reminding her that independence and duty could coexist, and that personal growth was possible even within the structures of tradition. Through it all, she carried herself with dignity and grace. She understood that life was a balance of responsibility, personal choice, and the wisdom gained from experience. Though her marriage was arranged, it was also an opportunity to demonstrate the resilience and intelligence that had guided her throughout her journey. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. And as she looked toward the horizon, watching the sun dip below the plains, Ayanna felt a sense of quiet determination. She had faced hardship, traveled alone, and navigated complex social expectations. Now she would face the challenges of married life with the same courage, wisdom, and strength that had carried her across the plains. She understood that life was a series of journeys, some chosen, some imposed, but that each offered lessons, growth, and the chance to leave a mark on the world around her. The years passed quietly, yet with a steady rhythm that marked the cycles of life for Ayanna and her family. The plains remained as vast and unyielding as ever, stretching endlessly beyond the village, carrying with them the sounds of wind, birds, and the distant lowing of cattle. Life had changed in many ways since the day she had been guided into marriage, yet some things remained constant: the warmth of the sun, the challenge of the land, and the quiet resilience that had always been part of her spirit. Ayanna adapted to her new life with patience and intelligence. She learned the routines and responsibilities that came with her role, balancing household tasks with the care of the land and the guidance of the younger members of her community. Though her independence had been tempered by duty, she never lost the sense of self she had cultivated during her journeys across the plains. Her days were busy, filled with meaningful work, and her nights often offered moments of reflection beneath the vast, star-filled sky. Even in the midst of these responsibilities, Ayanna's mind often wandered to the lessons of her past. She remembered the long hours spent traveling alone, the challenges of the plains, and the people who had offered her help along the way. John, the rancher who had once assisted her when her wagon was stuck, came to mind often. Though their lives had diverged, the memory of his kindness and respect remained a guiding light, a reminder that even brief connections could leave a lasting impression. The community around her respected Ayanna for her strength and wisdom. Her experiences as a traveler had shaped her into someone who could navigate both the practical and emotional challenges of life with grace. She became a source of guidance for others, sharing knowledge of the plains, survival skills, and the lessons she had learned about patience, courage, and resilience. Children and younger women often sought her advice, and she shared it freely, hoping to instill the same confidence and self-reliance she had gained on her own journeys. Her marriage, while arranged, grew into a partnership built on mutual respect. Though it had begun under the weight of tradition, both she and her spouse learned to appreciate the qualities each brought to the household. They shared responsibilities, supported one another through challenges, and gradually developed a quiet bond rooted in understanding and trust. Ayanna discovered that strength could take many forms, not only in independence, but also in the ability to cooperate, compromise, and adapt. Despite the passing years, the memory of the plains and her travels remained vivid. Ayanna often took walks along the outskirts of the village, watching the wind ripple through the grass, listening to the distant calls of animals, and remembering the long hours she had spent alone with only the horizon for company. These walks were both comforting and grounding, reminding her that her experiences had shaped her into the person she had become. The independence she had known in her travels remained within her, even as her life had expanded to include family, community, and new responsibilities. There were moments of quiet reflection when Ayanna considered the choices she had made and the paths that had been laid before her. She understood that life had offered her both freedom and obligation, adventure and stability. Each experience had contributed to her growth, teaching her lessons that could not be learned through ease or comfort. She accepted the realities of her circumstances with grace, recognizing that strength was often demonstrated not in rebellion, but in the ability to navigate life with wisdom, patience, and resilience. The broader world beyond the village continued to change. The plains saw new travelers, settlements grew, and interactions between different communities became more frequent. Gianna observed these changes with interest, noting how the land, the people, and the traditions adapted to the passage of time. She shared her insights with those around her, helping the community maintain a balance between the old ways and the new influences that arrived with the shifting world. Her perspective, shaped by both travel and tradition, became a bridge between generations, offering guidance rooted in experience. Occasionally, news arrived of distant travelers, bringing stories from the settlements and the plains beyond. Yana listened with curiosity, learning about the lives of others who had journeyed far, faced challenges, and demonstrated resilience in their own ways. These stories reminded her of the universality of struggle and courage, reinforcing the belief that human strength could be found in countless forms, whether in solitude, travel, or community life. As the seasons changed, Ayana found a sense of contentment in the rhythm of life. There was satisfaction in seeing the growth of crops, the health of her family, and the thriving of her community. The responsibilities she had once approached with apprehension became sources of pride and purpose. Each day carried its own lessons, challenges, and small victories. Through it all, she remained mindful of the balance between duty and individuality, understanding that life was a tapestry woven from both. On quiet evenings, Ayana often stood beneath the stars, thinking of the plains that had carried her through her journey. The land, the wind, and the horizon were reminders of her resilience and independence. She reflected on the moments when strangers had shown her kindness, the lessons she had learned from solitude, and the ways in which life had tested her courage. Each memory reinforced her sense of identity, reminding her that even within the framework of obligation and tradition, she retained the strength and wisdom that had guided her across the plains. Her family, too, came to recognize the depth of her character. Her parents and elders often sought her counsel, valuing her insight and the experiences she had accumulated. She became a respected figure in the community, admired not only for her adherence to tradition, but also for her ability to navigate change with grace. Younger generations looked to her as an example of how to balance duty, independence, and resilience, a living testament to the lessons of life lived fully and thoughtfully. Yana also found joy in the quiet moments of everyday life, the laughter of children, the companionship of her spouse, the simple pleasure of a well-tended garden, and the rhythm of the seasons. These joys were subtle but meaningful, reminding her that happiness often came in small, steady increments rather than grand gestures. Life had taught her patience, and she had learned to cherish both the extraordinary and the ordinary. Despite the many changes and responsibilities, the memory of her journey on the plains remained a source of inspiration. The challenges she had faced, the people she had met, and the independence she had cultivated were never forgotten. They lived within her as quiet strengths, guiding her actions and choices. Even when faced with difficult decisions or the pressures of tradition, she could draw upon her experiences, trusting in her ability to navigate life with intelligence, courage, and integrity. As the years continued, Ayana embraced her role in the community, balancing tradition with personal growth. She nurtured relationships, mentored the younger generation, and contributed to the well-being of her family and neighbors. Her life, though shaped by obligations, remained rich with experience, connection, and meaning. Each day was an opportunity to demonstrate the resilience, wisdom, and compassion that had defined her journey from the plains to her present life. And yet, the plains themselves remained a living memory, stretching beyond the horizon and reminding her of the freedom she had once experienced. Gianna carried that memory like a quiet treasure, a reminder that independence, courage, and personal strength were not lost, even when life demanded compromise. She understood that life was a journey of adaptation, learning, and growth, a path where resilience and duty could coexist, where challenges could be met with wisdom, and where even the most fleeting connections could leave lasting impressions. In her quiet moments, she sometimes imagined what had become of John, the rancher who had helped her so many years ago. Though their lives had diverged, the memory of his kindness lingered, a symbol of the good that could be found in the world, even amidst difficulty and uncertainty. Those memories, along with the lessons she had learned through her travels and her life in the village, shaped her into a woman of strength, dignity, and enduring wisdom. As the sun set across the plains, painting the sky with shades of gold, pink, and violet, Ayanna felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced the challenges of her youth, traveled far and alone, and returned to meet the obligations of her culture with grace. She had navigated the complexities of life, balancing independence with duty, courage with wisdom, and personal growth with community responsibilities. The years had shaped her, but they had not diminished the spirit that had carried her across the plains. And so, Ayanna's life continued, rich with experience, marked by the lessons of her journey, and guided by the resilience she had cultivated through hardship, travel, and the demands of tradition. The plains, the people she had met, and the paths she had walked remained a part of her forever, a testament to the enduring power of courage, compassion, and strength in the face of life's challenges. She understood, now more fully than ever, that even in a world shaped by obligation and expectation, the human spirit could remain free, wise, and unbroken.